I'm gonna regret not staying here for the new row, but I gotta get out of here. Yo, these two trucks just collided. Really? What is going on, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. So we just came back from the junkyard, and it's unfortunate that I left because they were putting a lot of new cars in. A lot of rows were getting cleaned up and they were getting removed. I know they were swapping out 2 rows. One of it was already full and it didn't really have anything special, but the second row had 2 cars in it, and I left before they can fill it up because I wanted to get started on today's task. But let me show you guys my quick little junkyard haul. So I had an EK cluster stashed in the back over there with an EF harness that it was wired to. I bought it years ago from the junkyard. It was in a wagon. I can't seem to find it in the garage, but I am going to look once more. But I went and got a different cluster from the junkyard. There was nothing manual EX, which has the RPM gauge, but I did snag an automatic one, the lowest mileage one in the yard. This is 174. So if you look here in this RPM, it stops at 8,000. Now, when I looked at the other cluster, the RPM goes to 9, right? You can see the difference on the red marking. This one goes to 9, so I just kind of picked the interface out because I'm going to swap it out. But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to attempt to wire in an EK cluster in the KRX. Let me explain why I'm doing a cluster swap. If you guys have seen the engine assembly video, I did show that I swapped out the Type S transmission for a Z3, which comes on the 8th gen SI, and the Z3 transmission has an OEM LSD in it. And because I'm keeping this car front wheel drive, I want to utilize my transmission. I want to show you quickly while the transmission is still here. Now, the 0204 RSX EP3 base model CRV element transmission uses a speed sensor in the back right here. This reads off a ring gear that's on the differential itself, and because this port is back here for a speed sensor, we can put a single cam speed sensor in it like this one and retain our stock cluster speedo cable, right? Which you can see over here, I still have it kind of chilling, right? And the difference is the Z3 transmission uses a magnetic sensor, not an analog, a magnetic sensor in the front. You can see it right here, and I made a sub harness right here to plug to my stock VSS harness so we can get the reading to the ECU. But this magnetic sensor picks up speed signal from, I believe, I could be wrong, the 3rd gear. The Z3 transmission does have a little hole back here, but it's not the size of a analog speed sensor. Now, because we can't put one there and we can't put one here, we have to swap over to a cluster that accepts, you know, electrical VSS. Now, back in the days, the write-up behind the tech says you can modify that port to put a analog speed sensor in there, right? But there's a few more things that's involved with that process. In order to use a regular speed sensor in the back of the transmission, you have to bore out the hole to fit the speed sensor, and then you have to get the ring gear and install it on the differential and press it on, so that way the speed sensor gear can read off of something, right? The simplest way, depending on how available a bell housing is to you guys, you can swap all the guts out and put a RSX bell housing, 0204 bell housing on here that already has the hole. So what I did back in the days, I did the whole entire process, and then I overbored that hole. That hole is bigger than the speed sensor, so when I stick the speed sensor in it, it doesn't sit straight. So the ring gear actually destroyed the gearing on the speed sensor. So that's why I got it plugged up. I ended up using that sensor, which then is the reason why I went with the S2K cluster in that car. Now, I don't want to rob the S2K cluster from the wagon and throwing it in this car. I kind of want to leave the wagon as is, and I decided to just opt for the EK cluster because there are a dime a dozen in the junkyard. And again, that is the goal for today, EK cluster swap. Let's get to it. Guys, I got super frustrated because I was taping this up right here so I can paint it, right? And then I somehow touched this needle and I snapped it in half, and the super glue just won't freaking glue it. Oh, I mean, it is glued now, but it took me like 20 minutes just to get it to freaking adhere together, right? But the needle's broken, and if I'm driving way too damn fast, I'm afraid this thing might break inside the cluster. And because all of that just happened, I decided to just dig deeper in my garage. But it paid off because I found my EK cluster and the harness. This is an EF harness. Let me show you guys real quick. Oh man, this is crazy. So this cluster, right, manual EX, RPM gauge, 194,000 miles, and this came out of a Civic wagon, and the person who installed it, I don't remember seeing all of this, but anyways, the person who installed this wrote down the mileage that this thing was installed, 194,481, and the car itself was 243,119, and the cluster was installed at 177,446. So you take this number minus that number, and then you add it to this number. That's what that wagon mileage was at. Now again, this is obviously not going to be accurate to the car because it doesn't belong to the car, right? But this harness came from that wagon that I salvaged this cluster from. So the person did a cluster swap and they wired everything up already. If you're doing a swap that's not a K-series into your EF and you're using the electrical VSS sensor, you have to wire it in this 3-wire prong that plugs to the top of the VSS. We have the power, the ground right here, and we have the signal that goes to the cluster. Verified here that this blue-white is the VSS signal, and then it has a bridge off of it, which is this guy, and this goes to the ECU, so the ECU can read VSS off the cluster, off this wire, off the sensor, right? Now, because the car is K-series, the K-series harness has the VSS already built into the harness from factory. The wires for the VSS go directly to the ECU, and the ECU is already going to read speed. Even if your cluster is mechanical like mine, the cluster may not work, but the ECU is reading it already. So instead of adding this harness like this and bridging this wire here, this blue-white wire goes directly to the ECU and splices into the harness that reads VSS signal. Not for sale. We lost a lot of daylight, but I was on the phone with Car Dude Garage Antonio for a little bit, kind of giving him some pointers about his channel. If you guys want to check out some Turbo F-Series Honda Accord stuff, be sure to subscribe to his channel. So right now I am just barely getting starting on the wiring for the KRX, and I already have the cluster, bezel, everything all taken out. I got the harness loom kind of cut down as far as I could, because obviously this is as far as I can pull it out. What I do notice between the wagon harness is that I don't have this blue plug there, but we didn't use any wire from that anyways, so I'm not too worried about this. But I also don't know what the function of it is anyways. So I have these all spread out. I double checked all the wirings. This is a 9091 harness, and I'm going to be using that diagram for this part of the cluster conversions. Again, I'm going to throw this whole entire chart on the screen. I am going to go ahead and mark the plugs so that way I know what are what. So the one with the most pin, 12 pin, is E. This plug right here is going to be E, and this plug is going to be F. Now, most people would just, you know, cut these plugs up, solder the wires in, because some of these wires are the same color, like green reds. I don't want to cut it up because I'm going to use the slots to identify which one functions what. So I'm not going to cut my plugs off. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wire the EK plug into my wiring with my EF plug still here. So that way, if I ever swap back to my EF cluster, my EF plug are still here. I'm going to leave the VSS here as well too, kind of just tucked away, because we're not going to be needing that anymore. But if I use my cluster again, I'll have that just chilling. So again, I'm going to bridge mine into my stock plug, and there are going to be a couple of wires coming from here going across to the other side. I think what I'm going to do with that is I'm just going to extend the wire just so I can like loom it nice and clean away from the cluster instead of tugging to get the plug to go where it needs to go, right? So simple enough, diagram on the screen. I'm going to go ahead and just start plugging these wires in one by one. The key word here is one by one. Let's get to it. So my partner has been keeping me company, although she hasn't been much of a help. But anyways, I got the cluster harness all installed, guys. I hate to say it, but I didn't like doing it this way, where because I wanted to keep my stock EF plugs, these aren't hardwired and shrink tubed. They are bridged into the stock plug and soldered, and then electrical taped a pretty decent thickness. So all of these are installed. This one right here is the VSS that goes to the ECU. I'll probably do that before I close this video out, because I am most definitely not going to carry it on until tomorrow. This green wire right here is just looped instead of cutting it off, because this one's not being used, as well as the what is this, B1 and B2. It's a yellow and pink wire, so these are just looped off as well. And the instructions didn't say anything about this blue plug, so I guess we're just gonna leave it be, even though my wagon harness doesn't have that plug either. So I don't think we're worried too much about this one. I do want to put the cluster on just to see if everything works, and she might be a little jumpy out of that seat in just a moment here, but I want to plug it up, make sure everything on the dash works. I can't obviously test speed because I still need to hook this up, and the car needs to be on the road in order for me to know that. This may be a tight little fit only because this cluster is a little bit bigger, and also we do still have these plugs in the way, so it's going to take up a little bit room back here. This one goes in this corner. This one goes to the very top, somewhere there. And not entirely sure how I'm going to figure out the mounting for this cluster, but it looks like the stock bracketry has to go. And that is this one here and this one here. But for right now, I'm just gonna let it sit and dangle. And watch this. I'm gonna put the key in, on. Let's see. Okay, I guess not. Oh, let's do it one more time. E-brake is on. I'm gonna drop my e-brake. That works. My trunk is definitely open. Not entirely sure why my gas light is on, but oh, there's no light bulb in it apparently, because I can block it off. Oil is gonna go off once the car turns on. And let's see here. Light works, baby. Okay, the dimmer's not hooked up, so I can't tell if the dimmer works. What is that, signal? Okay, well, my signal doesn't work because my bezel's not on. Let me hook that up real quick. I'm gonna hook up the dimmer as well. This is the dimmer. The dimmer works 100%. It is kind of like tweaking out, but on full blast it works. This is my emergency switch signal, right? And emergency. Gucci taters, dude. I do kind of have a full tank in here, so that may be correct. I'm not entirely sure, but Lucy, I'm gonna turn the car on. Okay, want to hear one more time? Lucy. Oh, she's not scared. Okay, RPM works. Let's go. I most definitely have a check engine light. Wow, okay. Oil light disappeared. We got oil pressure. Guys, I am super stoked. Super duper stoked. Yes, sir. You guys see that blemish right there? And that one. And that one right there. Wow, okay. Well, I guess the only thing left here is to pretty much modify the cluster into the bezel. And then the other thing is to wire the VSS signal to the ECU, which I still have to figure out what the pinout is. But for the most part, guys, EK cluster swap done. So guys, the bezel is kind of sitting on here right now. It's not secured, but I took off the left and the right bracket right here. That 2 bracket was preventing the cluster from going backward. With that off, I'm able to push this cluster as far back as possible to kind of shimmy the bezel on top of it. Watch when I press this, all the gap closes, right? 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 Yup. Yup. Right? This thing is not secured in there, but with the bezel pressing up against it, it actually does not move. Let me show you guys. So I'm gonna press up on the bezel. Make sure that the reset for the mileage is above the bezel. And I'm pressing it back now, flush all around. And the cluster doesn't even move. I don't even think this thing needs a bracket, even though there's really like no room for a bracketry. Now granted, there is a slight gap here at the bottom, but I don't think you're really gonna notice that. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I'm just gonna go ahead and put everything back on, run a single wire from this one on the top here, so I can put it all the way down underneath the dashboard towards the ECU. I have the bezel completely secured, right? Screw down here, screw down there, and then there's 2 in the back. The cluster does not move, right? I do have the wire for the VSS hooked up right here. Well, not hooked up, extended. And for the K series, we have to wire it into A18. Now, if you're using a different ECU like OBD1, P28, P72, whatever the case is, you have to wire it into a different slot. Give me 1 second. I'm just gonna put it right here on the screen. So if you're using K series A18, if you're using a regular OBD1 ECU, right there. I'm just gonna crawl underneath here and wire it up because I can't open that door. It's wedged between the truck. Aside from that, EK cluster conversion, guys, done. And I also forgot to mention my high beam works as well too. Flip my light around. Yes, sir. So in part of the high beam, when I put my whole entire front end back together, I did mention that I didn't have any headlight bulbs, and yeah, there's nothing there, right? Also, because these are single globe, these use H4 bulbs. Now, JDM, EDM, some uses H4H, some uses H4. The difference between the two is the housing. One is bigger than the other. Let me see if I have them here. So this right here, guys, is an H4H bulb. H4H is the smaller housing. You can see right here, these edges, these three little posts, right? This one right here is the H4. You can see how much larger it is, right? Quick little comparison, right? This right here, you can get it from the EK. I don't know if the EGs are the same size, but they do take the same 3-post style light bulb. So I kind of bought this from the store, and this is what I need for my headlight, right? Goes in like so. Got this little spring lockdown thinga, and that's secured. I'll go ahead and just put the other one in. A little springer thing right here. Stick that in there. Secure it. Booyah. So these headlights are EDM wagon glass single globe. Single globe means there's only one housing and it uses a dual filament bulb. Dual filament bulb means there's a high and a low beam in one bulb, where the stock EF headlights, they use a high beam and a low beam bulb, which then the high and low has their own harness. Now because we're using this headlight, we're gonna have to switch this 2 plug to a 1. Now this you can get from EK, you can get it from the EG. They use 3-prong, just like so, and they are color coordinated, left and right hand side, right? This one has a red, yellow, red, green, black. The other side has a red, blue, red, white, and a black. So pretty much all you do here is, I don't remember which one's left, which one's right, but you take the high and low, right? Because they are color coordinated. This is a red green and a red yellow. So red green and red yellow. Red green, red yellow. So you take red green to red green, red yellow to red yellow, loop the 2 black ground cable together and loop it to this 1 ground here. Plug it up and you should be able to have low beam and high beam on the same bulb. At least that's how I do it. So I'm just going to do it real quickly. Okay, so I have the red green together, the red yellow together, and the black. I only have one of the black because these 2 wires, they go to the same ground box underneath the fender here. And before I solder it up, I want to make sure it works. Hey, what are you doing? Okay, so first click, lights on the side on. Second click, oops, wrong way. Okay, we got lows. See, I'm gonna click on high right now, see if it changes. Yes sir, we got high beam, low beam, high beam, low beam. First click, on click, high beam. Yes sir. Solder it up, shrink tube it, tuck it away, put the grommet on to the next one. Headlight wiring, all done. Both sides. All right, so the last thing on the agenda for this video, guys, looking for the coolant reservoir I originally bought from the junkyard a little while ago, and I couldn't find it. So I went to the junkyard, saw this one, swooped it, and guess what? It was right here this whole entire time. Really? So anyways, that's going to be a spare, and this pretty much fits in the stock location. right here behind the motor mount, right? And all I got to do is lengthen this enough. Do I want to do a straight shot? Do I want to blend it? I don't know. Keep it simple. I guess I'm just going to go straight shot. And it looks like we're about there. All right, there we go. This was the leftover fluid from when I was bleeding the coolant the other day on the engine heat cycle. And just under max. Perfect. Guys, that's pretty much all we wanted to do today. And I'm super stoked because this thing is other than draining the oil, putting in the VR1, this thing is ready to hit the road or drive around. I hope you guys are as excited as I am, guys. I hope you enjoyed the junkyard run around that I actually recorded off my phone because I actually took off to the store. And then I was like, you know what, let's stop by the junkyard. So I stopped by the junkyard and I didn't have my camera with me, so I recorded off my phone instead. But hopefully you guys enjoyed the quick little junkyard run. Hopefully you guys enjoy the EK cluster conversion on the CRX. And also if you guys picked up a thing or two, be sure to leave a thumbs up. But if you guys want to stick around and see this car back up on the road, the alignment shop, the dyno, and just really enjoy the KRX again, be sure to hit the subscribe button. But with that being said, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.